the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
To start with, this is huge news because Del McGee, he's an OG when it comes to the Kirby Smart staff. Like he and Glenn Schumann were the last two left from Kirby's original staff in 2016. Ironically enough, James Coley was also on that 2016 staff, who's now the new wide receiver coach. But I think Del McGee is going to be a tough guy to replace. But to go start with James Coley, like I think James Coley is an absolute home run hire as the wide receiver coach for Georgia. I think I kind of compare it to Will Muschamp when he was at South Carolina. He kind of became a punchline in amongst fans of, he has his temper tantrums and all that, and he was a failed head coach at two different spots. And people kind of forgot that, but this is one of the elite defensive minds in college football. And just because he isn't a great head coach doesn't mean he's not a great recruiter and a great defensive mind. And if you have him doing that, he's going to be a huge asset to you. James Coley is one of the best recruiters in college football, specifically recruiting South Florida. And I think we all know the kind of talent that comes out of South Florida. That's a place you want to have a guy that knows a guy, right? So James Coley was a failed offensive coordinator. He did poorly at Miami. He did poorly in his 1 year as the Georgia OC in 2019. And I think a lot of people are going to hear that and think, oh, James Coley, that's Georgia's just trying to figure out. They don't even have a good guy to go to. Whereas, no, James Coley is not going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to be a wide receiver coach, and he's going to be a hell of a recruiter. And from that perspective, I think that's just a home run for Georgia.
Yeah, and I think friend of the pod, Graham Coffey, had a good tweet about this, where it's like Kirby, with these two hires, specifically Coley, like you alluded to, it just keeps up the track record that like he's going to prioritize recruiting good recruiters for these positional coaches above all else. And Coley is one of the best recruiters in the country. So getting him back in, and Georgia fans who have the memories of his 1 year stint as the OC, it's like, that's not what he's being asked to do here. It's a very different kind of thing, and you need some, like, positional coaches are tricky in terms of like how you manage how many just straight X's and O's, like positional knowledge guys with recruiting guys, because you need, every staff has to juggle. Okay, we can't have too many X's and O's guys. We still have to have guys who can get us to Jimmy's and Joe's. So you have to pick and choose which positional coaches have more of one of the other. You know what I mean? Like every staff has to go through this balance, and it's not just Georgia and Tennessee, but like I think what Georgia did and what Curry continues to do is he's like, he understands, and this is what Graham was talking about in the tweet, of like talent still trumps all, and Kirby Smart is not going to make it, even when he loses his two best recruiters on the staff, and Del McGee and Fran Brown in the same offseason. He's rebounded to strong, and he's brought in big time recruiters, and he's going to keep this train moving in that regard. So Georgia fans, like, don't worry about what that 1 year blip with Coley was. I mean, I think Coley's going to be fine. And I think it's a good hire. And then you even mentioned, like, so what can you tell us about Georgia going to the well and just losing Del McGee to an in-state school, to also being like, all right, well, we can play this game too. And we're going to go ahead and get Mr. Crawford from the flats, sir.
Well, that's it. The last thing I'll say about Coley too, if you go back to 2018, before he was named OC, like that wide receiver group had Riley Ridley, Mecole Hardman, JJ Holloman, Terry Godwin. Like that was one of Georgia's like deeper receiver groups, and Fromm's best year of his career also. So Coley definitely has a history of what he can do, what he's shown he can do at Georgia. But yeah, like you said, going to back to Del McGee, this is now the sixth head coach that has come from Kirby Smart since he took over in 2016. I think Georgia State, I think, is an absolute home run hire. Like, because of his high school connections, I think that's the biggest aspect to this. Because I noticed when looking at Josh Crawford, the guy they just got, who was at Georgia Tech this past year, I think he was a wide receiver coach at Georgia Tech after a couple years at Western Kentucky. This guy's been at Greater Atlanta Christian. He's been at Colquitt County. He's been at Valdosta. Like, he's been at all kinds of big-time high school football programs in the state of Georgia. And I think that's what you focus on here, because to lose a guy like Del McGee, it felt like he was kind of the high school guy on Georgia's staff, that he just had all those built relationships all around the state of Georgia. And I think you're seeing, once again, Kirby Smart prioritizing recruiting over everything else and getting another guy who's been a high school football coach in the state of Georgia from 2010 to like 2020.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just I always wonder though, like, because it's like a same deck hire for Georgia State. And I understand when people say stuff like that. It's still a tough job, man. I just think G5 jobs are brutal right now. So look, like I get the excitement there, but I'm still cautiously optimistic. Just because of the nature of those jobs and like how many guys you lose to the portal every season. Like Georgia State just got rated again. I'm sure Del McGee will retain a lot of guys and he will recruit well, but you have to re-recruit over and over again at the G5 level now, where it's just really really hard to retain your best guys. And I don't know. I just think that's why you're seeing like G5 guys like Sean Lewis, who leaves Kent State to be the OC at Colorado and takes a shot there. Even at the Power 5 level, you see some lesser Power 5 programs that have some NIL questions and just stability questions. Like Chip Kelly, he jumped ship for a coordinator job at Ohio State. Like, I don't know. I think Del McGee taking this is still a huge. It's a word. If you're Georgia State, you do this 10 times out of 10. But I wonder if you're Del McGee, like it's not the same as Fran Brown taking Syracuse. Like Syracuse has had history of success. It's still a P2 or excuse me, Power 5 job. This is a little bit more of a, all right, let's see how it goes. I mean, it's not like this is a slam dunk big history of success there. It's not like Georgia Southern where you can gobble up the win, stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I think you wish him well and you hope for the best, and it's a worthy swing for Georgia State. But I just think those G5 jobs, man, are so tough. And I wonder if I just wonder about like if it was the better path to be an OC at another Power 5 spot if you can't be OC at Georgia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was definitely surprised because I mean we see a guy like Sean Elliott leave Georgia State, and I think they hadn't been doing very well, right? So he might have been kind of.
He was a 500-ish, and they were about to have probably a pretty bad year. This year.
Like maybe I'm on a sinking ship and I need to go get on a Power 5 staff. Who knows what's going to happen with the future of the G5.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to have that guy leaving to go to a South Carolina position coach and have a guy leaving what we can probably call the best program in college football, right?
Yeah.
George leaving a position coach job there. And he had one of those like associate head coach type titles. Like he'd been there for a long time. And so to see him go to Georgia State, that was a little surprising. Like his name was thrown out there, like when the Auburn job was, he is an Auburn alum. Like, and maybe he feels like I'm never going to be taken seriously for one of those jobs if I don't have some head coaching experience first. And he's 50 years old. You know, he's not a super young guy. But I would say I was surprised. But I do think if there's a guy who can make Georgia State work, I feel like it's a guy who's going to have those high school connections. It's going to really be able to pitch Atlanta and everything like that. And also, when was the last time you went to? I don't know what it's Turner Field. I forget what Center Park Stadium or something like that.
I believe you.
I actually drove past there. I was dropping off Tori at the airport last week. That area is completely different. Like all the parking lots and everything, Turner Field, there's like apartments. It's like, it's an insane area. The basketball arena is over there now. Like it's kind of crazy what they've built up. So the Georgia State branding on formerly Turner Field has gotten way better. So it feels like there's not many G5 schools that kind of have the like bones that Georgia State has, you know, just being in that blueprint or in that recruiting footprint that Atlanta is, and Georgia Tech also being like one of the less competitive power big boys, you know, in the same city. I don't know. I think it's got a lot going for it. We'll see. It's definitely gonna be a challenge because when you're at that level and you do find a diamond in the rough, then the power programs will just come scoop them up.
No, 100%. And we'll see how it goes. Wish him the best and good luck over there in Atlanta. But what about, speaking of Georgia Tech, the big hire there as the Dogs' new running backs coach?
I think the biggest thing, like I was saying, is just the recruiting aspect to it. I think to have a guy that's got so much history of being a high school coach, he was never even a head coach in high school, but he's just been all over, Metro Atlanta down to South Georgia, and I think that's why he got this job. Like, I don't think he's there anything he did at Western Kentucky or Georgia Tech that got him this job. I think it's definitely his high school presence, and I think that's that jumped out to me, that like James Coley is replacing McClendon. Like, you're kind of getting, a guy who's got a more proven, I think, track record. McClendon was a good recruiter, but I think Coley's got a more proven track record as a recruiter and kind of has his niche, if you will, in niche in South Florida. But I think with this, it's like it's gonna be hard to replace, Del McGee. Like, so many of the big time running backs and the big time recruits Georgia got, Del McGee was a big part of. But I think you're seeing he was definitely the direct replacement just because of just with his high school connections.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of history. Like, he's Lee County, Valdosta, Colquitt for many years. Started out at GAC. Shout out to GCO, but part of some great Western Kentucky offenses. And I think this is just a brutal blow for Georgia Tech, because that's gonna be really hard to replace. And on that side of the staff, I mean, you still got Buster Faulkner, who excelled year one as OC for Brent Key, but that's tough to lose a rising star in the coaching industry like Josh Crawford just an hour up the road to your rival. That's tough, man. You don't see this very often. Who was the last Tech? I mean, do you remember one of a previous Georgia Tech coach who made the jump to Georgia?
No, I think like Buster Faulkner, like you said, that's one of the few I can remember, like going from Georgia to Georgia Tech. And, I remember JJ Green and who was it? Brent Scyther, I think this past year, like transferring from Georgia to Georgia Tech. I can't, as much of a rivalry as it is, like they're not really in the same ponds, if you will. So you don't see as much overlap in their Venn diagrams, if you will. So yeah, I don't remember the last time that Georgia poached a coach from Georgia Tech.
Yeah, it's interesting, but either way, I think Georgia fans should be excited about both hires there, because I think two big ones for the Dogs and replacing some big names there. SEC 2023 schedule review series, Matt Green, as we continue this weekly installment. This week, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Did they win enough games based on how their schedule ended up unfolding? Was it not enough wins based on what you and I saw as their expectations? And then maybe it was just right based on the schedule. Was this the amount of games they should have won, realistically speaking?
I'd say this is one of the easier ones we're gonna do on this in this series, because they were one of the, I think, bigger underachievers in the entire conference.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.